and welcome to Let's Talk HR with Dr. Deneen, the talk show that spotlights HR professionals and talks about all things HR. Today, we will continue our series on Let's Talk HR with Dr. Deneen called Careers That Rock. Oftentimes, HR professionals are instrumental in helping people find sustainable careers and finding their niche in the world of work. This series highlights amazing professionals and provides insight for those who may be interested in pursuing a career that rocks for them. I'm delighted to introduce the fifth guest of the Careers That Rock series. He's none other than Eric Sabatini, Senior Manager, HR Analytics and Performance, City of Memphis Government. And the career we will highlight today is Data Analytics Statisticians. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Eric.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
I am so glad that you're here to talk about your amazing career as a data analyst and to share some of your insights to people who may be interested in that same profession. So let's dive right in. Today, we're highlighting data analytics, right? In many ways, that's a statistician. That's a statistician. You are, first of all, an HR professional first. Let's get that clear. You're an HR professional first. But your role as a senior manager as in HR analytics and performance places you in a unique profession. So you have been a long time HR data analyst long before data analytics and people analytics were even discovered. He's been doing it for a very long time. You spent close to 30 years in your role utilizing and analyzing data, and many of those years have been with the City of Memphis where we were colleagues. So here's the question. Did you always know you wanted to work with data and statistics early on in your career? How did you get there?
Absolutely. I always felt like, I just enjoy solving problems, finding interesting ways to solve problems. So that's always been something that's interested me. And as you said, I kind of have done that type of work and didn't really know that it had this name.
Right. We didn't know it was called data analytics. Yeah, we didn't know at that time. So we're talking about data analytics, and oftentimes data analytics in the organization is what is called HR analytics. So tell us about what is HR analytics and why is it important?
So there's a very good definition of HR analytics that I really like because it's short and to the point. That's usually the best ones.
Yeah.
But it says that basically HR analytics is the identification and analysis of the people drivers of business outcomes.
Okay.
So if you look at those three elements, it's very short, very to the point, and it focuses on the people drivers of business outcomes because you always have to tie it back to the business outcome, especially the financial side of it.
Yes, so those people are driving outcomes. And so you're using the data, you're using the information to drive outcomes and make decisions.
Yes.
So why is that important to an organization?
So to me, I always go back, I say take a trip back in time a little bit to the 1950s.
Okay.
So a man named Peter Drucker, who was very well known as a management expert, business management expert, said, again, very short, very to the point, you can't manage what you can't measure. We've all heard that. But imagine him saying that in the 1950s when you didn't have the technology that you have today. So the idea of what you can measure, it was really before its time, and now we're getting into a time of technology where we can measure keystrokes, we can measure GPS, where people are going, we can measure just about anything, at least compared to 1950 we can. So that's really coming to fruition, and we're really understanding the value of measuring and taking a measurement and then seeing how we've progressed from one point to another.
Oh, that is absolutely wonderful. Good news already. So we talk about HR analytics. And then there's another phrase that's very popular today, and it says people analytics. So is HR analytics the same as people analytics? Tell us the difference.
It depends on who you ask.
Okay. I'm asking Eric Sabatini, what's the difference?
So officially what the difference is that people analytics is broader. HR analytics focuses more on the employees that are internal to the organization. People analytics, you go a little bit bigger and you say, let's look at the behaviors of our customers or our suppliers or our contractors, people who are involved or having an impact on the business overall, as opposed to more internal.
Okay.
But then again, you will hear a lot of people use those interchangeably.
Okay, so there's the same lesson one, right, today. So we know just by our conversation and the world of work that it's important to conduct HR analytics in the workplace. But we found that some organizations are really hesitant in doing so. So why have some been hesitant in HR analytics?
I think it just starts with, natural resistance to change. I think people always kind of get settled into doing things a certain way, and the idea of doing something different, it does tend to scare them a little bit. And you have to trust the data. You have to trust that your outcome, even though sometimes it may lead you in a direction you didn't think you were going to go in, if the data is telling you this, you should really trust that's true, that's a factual situation. There's, I'm a big movie buff, and there's a great example of analytics in a movie called Moneyball. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt's in it. A lot of people wanted to see Brad Pitt. It was actually a great take on analytics, applying it to baseball and how you decide what players you want to have on your team and your strategy during the team.
Yeah.
But it's also a great treatment of how the world of baseball hated the idea of just doing everything by the numbers and trusting the numbers as opposed to how we've done things before.
All right. So trust where the numbers take you. And we find that a lot in organizations, especially in employee satisfaction surveys. If it's telling you there's some gaps somewhere or some improvements that can be made, follow the data. Follow that data in doing so. So important. So we know there are many different levels of analytics that are used. So explain to us those levels, because there are different levels of it.
Sure. So they're generally considered to be 4 levels in analytics in general.
Okay.
And most organizations are sort of at the entry level, so that's where you see most organizations operating and some moving up to the higher levels, but you can kind of think of it as a swimming pool and going from the shallow end to the deep end of the analytics pool.
Okay.
But you start off with descriptive analytics. That's basically just what happened. And a lot of times organizations are just like, we just want some information. We want to know, let's say our turnover changed from last month to this month, from 5% to 10%. So we know that now.
Yeah.
The next step up is diagnostic analytics.
All right.
So using kind of big words.
Use them. We're learning today. Here, you've seen it here.
That means you're actually asking the question, why did this happen? So you're digging a little deeper. You don't just know that your turnover changed from 5% to 10%. You're a little worried. You want to know, why did that happen?
Yeah.
So you look at, to do that, you might want to do, like an exit survey. As employees leave, what is making you want to leave the organization?
Yes.
So then you go a little deeper into the pool, and there's something called predictive analytics.
Okay.
Now we're starting to ask questions about, how are things relating to each other, and if we pull on this lever, what will happen to turnover? If we turn this knob, what will happen to turnover?
All right.
And you're starting to kind of put those things together. Then, if you want to go way, way to the deep end of the pool,
let's go to the deep end.
You have something called prescriptive analytics, which I always remember that, thinking of a doctor giving you a prescription.
Yes.
So that means you're really coming full circle. You've used all the data, you've considered all these options, you've determined what's going on, and you've come to a conclusion and you've made a decision, a truly data-driven decision. And this is how we're going to address turnover.
All right. You heard 4 definitions or 4 levels of data analytics. I tell you, this is great. Listen, you're watching Let's Talk HR with Dr. Deneen, and we're talking about careers that rock. And the career we're talking about today is data analytics, statisticians, and he's telling us all about it. So let's change subjects just a little bit. So we know that there are a ton of metrics that can be used dealing with people and dealing with processes. How should an organization decide which metrics to measure?
So from my experience, I would really look at probably 3 things. I would look at, first of all, is this important to this organization?
Yes.
There's a long list of dozens of things that people have documented that from an HR perspective we can measure, and you can kind of get caught up in wanting to know everything.
Yes.
But what's really important to you from a recruiting perspective? Maybe you're the type of organization that has high turnover, has a large employee population, and speed is important to you, volume of recruiting. Another organization, they may be smaller, they may be more technical in nature, and they need people with advanced skill sets. The quality of hire may be something you want to measure. So depending on who you are, what your culture is, think about what's important to you. Then other things certainly to consider. Is this truly measurable?
Yes.
So everything can be measured, but is there an effective and efficient way to do it? Do you need to create new ways to gather data to be able to measure this? Is it worth it to you to do that? So that's what's very important. So that's really what I would say is what I would consider to do that.
Okay. That is wonderful. Just because it's popular and just because it's the buzz doesn't necessarily mean that it's important to your organization, which is going to drive change and drive performance. So that is so important. So there are a lot of metrics. You said there are a lot of ways in which you can measure and a lot of definitions of the metrics. What metrics are most commonly used in HR analytics?
So you can look at recruiting metrics, hiring metrics, and one of the first things when we kind of started our official department was measuring time to fill.
Yes.
So that's a very common one, and also an easy one you can get started using. There are a couple of different ways to look at it actually. Time to fill, you want to measure from the time that the department says we want to hire someone, we have a vacancy we want to fill, to the point that the person starts in the job.
Yes.
And you can generally get that data pretty easily, especially from current HR systems.
Yes.
Another way to look at that is from the applicant's perspective. So, and that's usually called time to hire instead of time to fill.
Okay.
But from the time that the applicant puts their application in, tells you I'm interested in this position, to the time of you making an offer to that applicant, what was that time period? And that's really critical because one of the worst things you want to have happen is you find the right candidate, the perfect person.
Yes.
You call them up, you make a job offer, and they say, "Well, I already started another job."
Right.
Someone else got me first.
Yes, someone else. Hey, it's a game these days. Yes, absolutely. That is so true. That's one data analytic method that you can use to implement today. So let's talk about another one, because we said we're going to talk about 3. Let's talk about another one.
Sure. There's so many in the recruiting area. Offer acceptance rate is something that's pretty easy to start. You just look at how many offers you're making and how many are being accepted. Also in the hiring area, cost to hire.
Yes, absolutely.
That can be a little more complex because you want to really take in all the factors, everything that drives that cost to fill positions. Then in another area, turnover is huge.
Turnover
Everyone
is
wants
huge.
to measure turnover
Yes.
and reduce bad turnover, because there is good turnover and bad turnover.
Yes.
You might have someone stay with you for 25 years and retire. That's
Yes.
great. That's what we want people to do.
Yes.
But then, when someone stays a couple of years and then they voluntarily, leave to go to another organization, that's when we want to start looking at those rates and how often is that happening.
Yes.
So definitely the turnover rate and also the retention rate.
Yes.
How long are the employees who are there? How long have they been there? What's their average tenure with the organization?
Yes.
So those are things that you can measure pretty easily. And again, most HR systems, that data is pretty readily available.
It's right there. You're learning it here today on Let's Talk HR with Dr. Deneen. Those metrics that you can implement today. Eric said it's easy to do and pretty reasonable and practical to do it because you have HRIS systems that could possibly help you calculate those things. All right, so that was about 5. We said we were going to do 3, but that's about 5. Are there others that you want to highlight?
Oh, you can get into absenteeism,
Okay.
and measure the how often people are using leave time and what's that cost to your organization. You can also look at organizational metrics, vacancy levels. Actually, one very popular one that we don't really get involved in because I'm more in the public sector. But
Yes.
in the private sector is revenue per employee. That's something that is fairly easy to measure. You look at your overall revenue and divide by your number of employees, and organizations like to know year over year, what are we getting per employee in terms of the revenue we're generating as a company.
He's an expert, right? He's an expert, and I'm telling you, we're learning about metrics and things that help drive your organization. So, if someone is interested in a career in data analytics, right? So it's a sector now, data analytics. How should they prepare? Formal education, degrees in it. How should they prepare for that particular career?
It's still developing. I think, locally here we have universities that are offering more classes in that. One thing that I would definitely recommend right now, SHRM has a certificate program of people analytics.
Yes.
So again, I know we're talking about HR versus people, so they're SHRM, they're HR, but it's a people analytics. So again,
It's interchangeable, right? We talked about that, yeah.
But it was, a great online course that, you study, you work on a project, and you really gain a good understanding coming into that field.
Okay, so there are definitely degrees in it, and there are courses that you can take where you can become an expert in that field. So what are some of the challenges of implementing or using HR analytics? Are there some challenges?
Well, one thing I would definitely say is the possibility of having too many things that you're measuring.
Too many,
kind of
yeah.
Scope creep, I guess, because people feel like more information is always better, and that's true, but it comes at a cost sometimes when it's not readily available. There's a lot in that area. One thing I would be concerned with is making sure your data is accurate.
Yes.
So kind of those steps that you go through, you need to validate your data, make sure that it's being updated. So if you're pulling data from a system, make sure the users of that system are putting accurate data in and putting it in a timely manner. So you're running it from good data. And if you're not, that that and I need to go back and clean this up if I want to use this data.
If I want to use the data. Okay, very good. So how would an organization implement an HR analytics project? Say, for instance, there's a project that they want to do. How do they implement it?
So you really start with a question or a hypothesis.
Okay.
And that's important to say we're trying to to find the answer to this.
Yes.
One of the challenges that you really see a lot that isn't talked about a lot is it's known as confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
So
tell us about it.
The idea of coming into this question or this, what are we trying to find? But really, intuitively, I already know what the answer is. I know what I'm going to find.
Yes.
But we're just going to prove what I already know.
Okay.
Well, sometimes you don't.
You dig in there, you may get a surprise, right? Yeah.
So that's sort of the first step, and I can actually give you an example, a real life example from recently. We were asked, the question was, if we reduce sick leave, how much will we reduce overtime costs?
Okay.
So if we're able to affect that reduction of sick leave, how much will we see overtime go down? And so now we're getting into sort of the predictive analytics level.
Yes.
And it was very interesting. We went through a process of measuring sick leave, measuring overtime, looking at the correlations. It's called regression analysis. I'm not really as advanced to do advanced regression analysis, but we could do it on a basic level. And what we found was, surprisingly, there was no clear correlation.
Okay.
And intuitively, you wouldn't think that would be the case. Certainly, if you reduce the time people are off, then you're having to give shifts to other employees, you're having to drive up overtime. The reason, from kind of a statistical perspective, there are other factors. There are other big factors that are kind of crowding out sick leave. So it may be operational issues. It may be you had a big project. You had to work a lot of employees overtime. It could be budget reasons. Sometimes organizations clamp down on overtime just when their budgets get tight.
Yeah.
So what we found was really, you're not going to see a big significant change in overtime because other things are driving it.
Okay.
So that was a case of a little bit of confirmation bias. But we went through all the steps that you're talking about. We gathered the data, we analyzed the data, we cleaned the data. We also had to interpret what was the data telling us, look at how does this data relate to that, and get into coming back with an answer that some people honestly just kind of shook their heads and they didn't believe us. But the truth was that wasn't a strong driver of our overtime costs.
The truth is the truth, no matter who tells it, no matter how it comes out, right? Here's the last question, and I'm gonna have to ask you to answer it really quick, okay?
Sure.
So what advice would you give a CHRO about implementing HR analytics?
So probably first, again, control your scope.
Control your scope.
So make sure that you're focused only on the things that are very important to you.
Yes.
Make sure you have good data.
Good data.
And, very important, to have the right system in place.
Yes.
So, you may have an older system, you may have an opportunity to upgrade it. Some of the newer systems, certainly if they're cloud-based, you have automatic updates. They have provide you a great opportunity just out of the box to do a lot of data analytics work.
That is awesome advice. Anything else you would like to tell us?
It is very important when you're looking at putting together a data and analytics process to make sure that your data is actionable. I would say from personal experience, I learned that early on because I did create a report of data, and it was related to overtime, and I really found some interesting conclusions where I thought we were spending more in overtime or we saw less expense in overtime, and presented just the data, just the raw data, and the response was basically, well, that's interesting. And that was it. And what I learned is, in data analytics, you have to sort of have that punchline and say, okay, based on this, I recommend that we consider taking this action. Just having the information really isn't as productive as being able to use it.
Yes. So CHROs need to know that the data that's gathered should be actionable, that it should be some that you can use. And like you said, that punchline would be, here are the recommendations.
Yes,
yeah?
definitely.
All right, that is great. Oh, wow. Hey, you've heard it here today. Have you learned a lot? Let's thank Eric Sabatini. Clap your hands at home for the information he's given us today. This has been absolutely outstanding. Outstanding. Wow, we have learned so much about the career and profession of data analytics, statisticians, with my guest Eric Sabatini, and an amazing profession. Being informed and aware of possibilities of different careers is just paramount. HR professionals can help resource and be the resource to help educate and guide those to careers and professions that rock for them. Be sure to watch Let's Talk HR with Dr. Deneen on the first of every month on the YouTube channel of the same name, and on Comcast Xfinity Channel 17 Monday nights at 8 o'clock through 8:30 p.m. Please note you can watch Let's Talk HR with Dr. Deneen and prior episodes at any time. Go to the YouTube channel and type in the talk show title. Be sure to subscribe, no fee, and click on the notification bell. This is HR TV. I'm Dr. Deneen, and I want to talk HR with you. HR forever. See you next time.